Welcome, everybody. So this is an introduction to the CITE-ITEL project that we're working in, and I'm here with two brand new graduate students, still trying to figure out what they're doing, and as we move forward, you'll hear me talk about inviting them into the project and the role that graduate students in our program have been playing in the project and the possibilities for that. You will at the end get a choice of whether you want to participate, so it's not forced participation. We're also using, and this is Lucas Horton. Lucas is, this is Lakia, and this is Susan, and this is Lucas. Lucas Horton is the director of the, what's the?
Office of Instructional Innovation.
Office of Instructional Innovation, and I think we somehow fall into the category of innovation and technology. So Lucas has been our go-to person in constructing this vision of something that we're thinking about. So I'm going to do it both as an orientation to the two of you, and as well to anyone else that might be watching that would like to know what CITE-ITEL is about and what we're working on the project. So at its heart, what we're doing is a literature review. So it's, in many ways, it's things that are traditionally familiar. Journals publish literature reviews all the time. They're entitled journals focused and dedicated to literature reviews. CITE-ITEL is going to be a little bit different. First of all, it's focused on, I want to say narrowly, but not narrowly focused on teacher education in literacy. So we're not doing a literature review of everything. We're doing a literature review of all research that's been done on initial teacher preparation certification, but really focused on literacy. So it's either got to be language preparation, reading preparation, writing preparation, or some sort of combination of that. So that's the body of work that we're trying to represent for the field. So that's why the ITEL part, which is initial teacher education and literacy, is the ITEL. I haven't told you what the CITE part is, but that's the ITEL part. What's unique about this particular literature review is the CITE part of it, and that is that it is a literature review that's going to be online and that anyone can have access to at any point in time. And they can come to that and they can look at articles, they can look at syntheses that have been written there as part of the work that we're doing in constructing the site, right? And CITE stands for, it's an acronym just like ITEL, CITE stands for Critical, Interactive, Transparent, and Evolving. And that's what makes this, those are the features that make this particularly unique. That is, it'll be interactive. So if somebody comes to CITE and sees, for example, maybe that their study's not represented, they can come into the site and engage with us and say, by the way, you missed 5 of my studies that absolutely meet the criteria that you're looking for. Or it may be somebody just comes in and wants to interact around a particular finding or start a community of scholars that are focused on a particular line of research. So that interactive feature is one that's evolving. What we're going to look at today in terms of CITE is the sort of back part of CITE. It's not right now what people are going to see when they come to CITE. So that's for Lucas to work magic around that. What will it look like when people come to this on their own and want to interact with it? Our interest for you is really on this back end side of filling the site with studies, filling the site with the syntheses that we need to do. That's our basic work. Is that making sense in terms of sort of the features of it? And all of this, of course, when you go to CITE, will be described in terms of what our purpose is and what we're trying to do. And we take our purpose very seriously, that teacher education and university-based teacher education particularly is important work, and that there is a body of scholarship that's available and out there that not everyone is attending to because it hasn't been gathered together in ways that that a policymaker, for example, or a new researcher could use, where they could locate that body of research and come to it and either advocate for something or perhaps defend for something that should be going on inside of practices. So that's our goal, is really a commitment to representing and improving the quality of teacher preparation with audiences that range from researchers to practitioners to policymakers, all of those groups. Okay. So what we've done is we're looking at studies in a time range. So we're at this point looking at between 2001 and 2015.
Okay.
And so that's our initial sort of year-long work that we've been doing. In future years, we'll keep expanding from 1 year forward, 1 year backward. So next year, our job will be to go back through this process again for the year 2016, and for the year, whatever, the 2001, that we'll go back 1 more year that way. So we'll keep expanding so we get a fully inclusive database, and one that's relevant. So what we focus on are any research studies, and they have to be published in journals. They have to be published in refereed academic journals that focus on the questions related to preparation of K-12 in initial licensure programs. We're trying to be careful about our language because the international sort of work that's going on, of which we're finding lots of international work, is not always using the same terminology that we would find in the US. So the term cooperating teacher, for example, that's not common. Even the term pre-service teacher is not common across. So that's why we use that initial teacher licensure kind of a framework so that everybody sort of becomes part of the same community. So it has to focus on that. Has to focus in literacy, I think I mentioned that. Has to report an empirical study of new data or secondary analysis of existing data. Has to have clearly stated research questions or purposes, description of methodologies, and a report of findings, and it has to appear in English. That's our limitation. We would love to have this expansive multilingual, and perhaps in the future we'll be able to get that, but for right now, it's limited to articles that appear in English. What we do in terms of, let me talk about the collaborators a little bit on the project. Because collaboration is important. And stop and ask questions, and Lucas, you jump in. Everybody, okay. I want this to be not me talking the whole time. So this is a huge, huge project, and the teams of people working are critical for the success of the project from the starting point to as we continue. So we think, first of all, that we have collaborators that will be using this that are associated with the International Literacy Association. With the Literacy Research Association, excuse me, and perhaps the International Literacy Association too, but certainly LRA. LRA is collaborating with us in this project. It's been submitted and approved by the board. We have partners from the research committee that are our liaison to the board and to the organization. Our connection of CITE, which is constructed and located here at the University of Texas, right, will eventually be connected to the LRA website so that members of LRA website, and probably what we'll have is some restrictions on the interactive features so that we don't get everyone on earth coming to the site beginning to interact, but that if you're a member of LRA, then you can go to the interactive features. If you just want to go to CITE to look at CITE and to read and consume, you can do that, but the interactive features will come through through that. We talked about the interactive features a little bit, and we'll go back to talk more about that. I think I was going to talk about the team. Let me switch down to the team here of who's involved. So we have the work that Lucas is doing in terms of the technical support. We have language and literacy faculty here at the University of Texas that are sort of our lead people. That's Brandy and me and Beth and Melissa and Diane. Mm-hmm. In addition, one of the things that's happening is our graduate students graduate, and they've been part of CITE, and what they're doing now is they've created their own little sort of alumni team that continues to work in CITE. So for right now, Michelle Fowler-Amato at Old Dominion University is sort of the person that is taking the lead on that particular team. Then we have, those are our graduates, the graduates of our program that are at Ohio State, Boise State, and different universities. Mm-hmm. We have the team at the University of Texas, which your name will soon be added to as soon as you sign that dotted line. So these are our current doctoral students and clinical faculty that are part of the project. And this team, as you'll see as we describe it, is really essential. And there's Laura Hansfield and Judy Lysacker, who are the current, I still believe, chairs of the Literacy Research Association Research Committee, and they're our contact people. And then we have almost 100 people on our editorial advisory board, and we're really excited about the role that they'll play, their participation. This was an invitation that we put out for people who would come and work with us in CITE, and it's just the enormous amount of interest, and it ranges from, I mean, I think there are probably 7 past presidents of LRA on there, but there's graduate students as well. I mean, that sounds like, but there's graduate, and there are graduate students as well. It represents sort of the full range of people that are interested in and committed to teacher education and quality preparation in teacher education. So that's the team, and part of what I'll talk about is we move forward is the different roles that people will play in working within this system. I'm going down the left side now of the site. If you go to CITE from the inside right now, you'll have this welcoming page, you'll have the team page, and let me go back to the welcome page, because that really talks about the process that we use. So what we've done in CITE, as with any traditional literature review, is first thing to do is to cast the net and find all the studies that fit your criteria. And the way we've done that, I think, is a little unusual. We're going through this at the journal level. That is, what we're doing is we're locating journals that have published research in literacy teacher preparation. And we're going and doing, I guess the old term is still a hand search. Now, in the old days, what that literally meant was you go to the library and you go to the shelves and you find the little stack and you find the journals and you open the journals and you go through them page by page. Well, those days, that's changed, right? So what we're finding now is most of these journals that we're working with are indexed and they're online. So actually, to go to a journal, to go to Reading Research Quarterly, to go to the year 2015, to go to the 4 issues, all of that information is at the click of a finger. So you can do, maybe we should call it a finger search rather than a hand search, because a few click searches, you can start looking in these journals for articles that might meet our criteria. And we've chosen that over these, what people use a lot today, and those are these keyword searches through these databases. So people will go, I don't know what's the most popular, Lucas, of the databases? EBSCO, something like EBSCO, and they type in teacher preparation, research, literacy, and then 550,000 articles will show up something, or maybe one would, and so you sort of narrow by words. But what we found from following that research is you tend to miss a lot, and you tend to get a lot in your bucket that really doesn't have anything to do with what you're interested in. So what we're doing is doing the hand search approach, and with a backup of these keyword search. So afterwards, after we're done at a particular phase, we go back and do these keyword searches and see, did we miss something, right? In identifying journals, the way we've done that is we went to a key article. It was a literature review. It's not identified on here. It's at some place. Let me just back up and see. Maybe it's on the journals page, do you think, Lucas, on the overview? Yes, it is. There it is at the bottom. So what we did was we went to a literature review that was published in 2008 by Vicki Risco, Kathy Roller, Cummins, Bean, and Block, and Anderson Flood, sorry. And we went to that literature review, which was a comprehensive literature review of the same literature, and we went to their references, and we identified all of the different journals that had been identified in their literature review. So that was our starting place. So we said, we're going to look at all of these journals, and we're going to start looking at all years of these journals and finding articles that meet our criteria, right? Now, there's a trick here that we use this expansive kind of system. So if we would come across an article, for example, in teaching and teacher education that was literacy related, we would analyze that article if it met our criteria, but then we would also go to the references of that article and see, are there any articles that were referenced that in their database, as part of their referencing system, in journals that we currently don't have in the system. And if that's the case, then that journal gets nominated into the system. So the journals are constantly expanding. So for example, I'm going to go to the All Journals page. You'll see now that we have identified over 85 journals. We started with like 20, and it will continue to expand. So as these journals get expanded, they get entered into the database, and basically that's our center point then for going in. So as soon as a journal comes in, that's the way it works. Now, what happens is, and now we're going to be talking about work that you're going to be doing, possibly. So the journals, this is not very creative or scientific, but we divided the leadership team of the project, the faculty basically, into letters ranges. So Randy has A to D. So any journal that begins with A to D automatically falls into Randy's. So let's say, for example, I was doing my search and we found a new journal, Action in Teacher Education. I enter that journal and then I assign that journal to Randy because he's in the A to D range, right? That range has sort of changed over time because we've found that those people that got R tended to get a lot more articles than the A to Ds. So we've adjusted the alphabet sort of referencing based on, so that there's a fairly even load across that range of journals. So everybody has relatively the same. So what would happen is you would be assigned to a team. So you might be on Bomer's team, you might be on Diane Shallert's team, whatever. So that's the team that would then take on and organize their search of all those journals. That makes sense. So again, we have 85 journals that we've identified. If you go to a journal, you can click on a journal, you can see which group it's in, you can see the years that have been completed in terms of the review. And then down at the bottom, what you're going to see is all of the articles that have been identified that have made their way into our database. Okay. And this is one of those things from the outsider's perspective. If I'm interested in, let's say I'm thinking about publishing in Action in Teacher Education. They seem to be publishing a lot of research related to literacy. You could go back and see all of the different articles that appeared in that particular journal. So it's one of those sort of added features. That's going to be useful to us moving forward.
And then just as a question, are those links to the actual article, or is it links to information about the article, or does it depend?
Right now, those are links to our record of the article within the system. So if we were to click on one of those links, it would take us directly to the data that we have entered for that article.
So I'll just pick one. And this now is an article page. Mm-hmm. So someone like you has taken on the task of, I found an article. It meets all of our criteria. Mm-hmm. And that what you would do is go into the articles section here and click on New Article, and a blank sort of record would come up, and you would begin entering that article. We have it set up in a way, if you'll look at this one, for example, you would go in, you would start it off, I identified this article, you'd put the title, you'd get the journal, you'd get the reference, and we use, we're relying a lot on Google Scholar right now. So we'll go to Google Scholar, Google the article, and if you've ever seen on the bottom of Google Scholar, it has a place called CITE. Mm-hmm. And so if you click on that, it'll give the different referencing systems. And so just to sort of get a common way of doing it, we've been using the APA Google Site representation of that particular article. So we just copy and paste that. You put the abstract if there's an abstract, and then you actually upload the PDF file for that article into this space here. So for us, that's easy, because now the articles are right there. I can click and I can look at the article. If you're coming in from the outside, we can't provide that access with all of the sort of issues around ownership and proprietary rights to things. So we would have enough information for somebody to locate the article, but we wouldn't have the article itself. We do put the DOI. And if there is a DOI, does that mean that doesn't even mean that they can access it for free, right?
No, the DOI would be useful to generate a link to the permanent home of the article on the web. So if they had the DOI and they had access through their institution, they could click the DOI link and then log in through their library or however they access the journal and then get the PDF if they have access. Otherwise, they'll just get the record from the publisher.
Right.
Right.
And that's become. Go ahead.
I just want to. It's not really connected to that, so I'll wait.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was just thinking back to the journals. It looks like there are 85 journals, and they're all like different topics. I think I saw like action, and then I think I saw another one. I forget the name. But so within all those different journals, because they're by topic, they seem very different. Do they all, the articles that are pulled out are ones that focus on initial teacher preparation for literacy in that specific like domain, or just for that specific article?
Well,
Because I saw like action, like if I'm thinking about like, I think I saw like action
action in teacher education.
in teacher education. So
That's been a very that we're finding lots of work in there because
Okay.
it tends to focus on teacher educators studying their own practices.
okay,
And so that's an important journal for people to begin to represent and submit their own work.
okay,
But something like Reading Research Quarterly, which is a more, a high prestige, a high level journal in the field, sponsored by the International Literacy Association, that journal doesn't publish often inside of literacy teacher preparation.
Okay.
So if we look for, we could do that. If we go to that article, we could see how many articles have met the criteria in RRQ. But all of them, all of them share those features of initial teacher preparation, literacy, all that.
okay. So I'm thinking like if I come in, if I'm approaching, like maybe I'm a teacher and I visit this website and I'm like, I want to look at like, I guess like information for a specific population. Does it lend itself to that too? Or like maybe like language or initial literacy preparation, but like my students are bilingual or?
Yes.
Okay.
We're going to get to that.
Okay,
Well,
all right.
that's because one of the things that actually Lucas, I think, thinks about all the time
Okay.
is in designing a site like this, who's coming to it? And what are the questions that they're bringing? So a researcher might come to it and say, am I in it? So we've got to think about, okay, so we got to have a search feature that someone comes in and can put their name in and find all the articles that fit in. And that's going to be helpful to us from the interactive place because somebody can say, hey, they missed 3 of my pieces that need to be in this. And so the interactive features will allow us to, someone to submit that, for us to review that, and for us to add that into the database. So I'm not making light of it, but it is an important feature of the site.
Yeah, and just kind of thinking about all the various lenses that someone might apply when sort of looking at the site. Is it a methodological lens?
Yeah,
Are they looking at a specific geographic area?
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways that we've categorized the articles that are coming into the system that I think over time we'll be sort of thinking about and thinking,
Yeah.
well, what would be really useful ways for people to look at articles.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No,
I know you keep, no, this is good.
No, because I'm just thinking like initial teacher preparation for literacy may look different in Michigan versus like New York versus like Texas, because those are like 3 distinct places that I've been,
Right.
and I'm like, it looks very different. So do the articles that are in here, like would they be able to like speak to initial teacher preparation and literacy for those geographic areas as well?
We're going to talk about that,
Okay,
but
all right.
the answer is yes.
Okay.
Yes, the answer is yes,
All right.
and not yet.
Okay.
And by the way, the thing I didn't say about this from the beginning is there's nothing like this. So we don't know. We're not following somebody else's model. We're not tinkering with something that like, well, they did it over here, and we're going to do this. We can't find anything like this. So that's good, exciting, but it's also, we use the metaphor, we're sort of building the ship as we're going.
Okay.
And it leaks. So we constantly are discovering places of, oh my gosh, we need to do this, or we should add this, or wow, or we could do. So there's a lot of that going inside of this process as well. So when you ask questions like that, part of our minds is, how could we do that? How could we do that? How could we do that? And we're doing that. We're growing this as we're continuing. One of the things I want to point out is that, so if you were entering an article, if you were lucky enough to find an article and enter it in, you would then stop at that point. Once you added in the article, everything like that. And what that does is that cues into our system an alert to that group leader to say, okay, Lakia found an article, and so he would assign someone else in his group to go look at that article. So let's send Susan to the article. And the first thing they would do is come to the article and say, and read it and do the same analysis and say, this doesn't fit at all, right? It's not, this is in-service teachers, or there's no data collector, there's no findings, or something like that. And if they did, they would mark disconfirm. And you'll see there what pops up is a list of, I'm not sure, does not focus on area of literacy. So the second person came in and said, this is not literacy. And this is not a sufficient enough focus on literacy to fit into this journal. In that particular case, in a disconfirmed case, then it goes back to the team leader again, and now the team leader has to come and read the piece and make a decision about whether it's confirming the disconfirmation, some of this language, confirming the disconfirmation, which means nothing continues, or they may go back with the original person and say, no, we're going to confirm this article. And once the article gets confirmed, I don't want to mess with this, Lucas.
Just don't save it
If I don't save anything? Okay. Let me change it over to confirm. Once you come in as the second person and confirm it, then all of the analysis stuff starts. Okay? So that's when you're actually taking an article, like the one I did this morning. You take the article and you're going to go through it in every way in terms of all of the sort of traditional sort of features, the approach, the geographical setting, for example. Now, one of the things that we've committed to early on is relying on the language of the user. So if somebody says, my space that I'm doing this research is in Eastern Appalachia, we put Eastern Appalachia. And so what we end up with is quite a large listing of areas in which research is done. And eventually we're going to come back to this and maybe do some collapsing. So we can look at within US, outside US, and other locations. There's some collapsing that we can do of these, but for right now we're respecting the terminology that was used, or perhaps, as in this particular case, nothing was cited in terms of the location. And the same happens with, so you're going to see this in terms of research approach, just a different language that people use to describe the work that they're doing and the approach that they're taking. It goes on, I'm going to go down through fairly quickly. The institutional context, the certification level, the programmatic focus. So some of these studies, for example, may focus on ESL learners or English language learners or new literacies or other things. The context. If we think about the study, was it going on inside of a course that someone was teaching? Was it going on in some practicum work that the teachers were doing? So where was the work being done? Who were the participants? In terms of the pre-service participants. And then since our focus is on pre-service, but we also find in many studies that other data is being collected. So this study I did here, for example, it was looking at both pre-service teachers. Actually, they were all pre-service teachers. Some were undergraduate completing their graduate, no, all of them were in a graduate program, but it was still for initial certification. So it fits our criteria. But in this particular study, there's a big focus on the professors, the tutors that were observing. It's a coaching study. So it was looking at the coaching practices in a clinical setting for pre-service teachers or for teachers in the certification program. So this for additional data that's being collected. The duration, the data sources, this goes on and on and on. And it's in part telling about our field that people use so many different terms to describe what they're doing and what the data sources are they use. And we fully believe that at some point, thinking back to users, somebody's going to be very interested in that. I'm interested in the range of different methodologies, different frameworks, different analytical tools, processes that people use, and that will be available to study as well. Researcher positionality, is that one of, are you an insider studying this? Is it us studying our kids inside of the work that we're doing right now, looking at uses of informational text and inquiry? We would be an insider studying our own practices and studying our own students. But there's other perspectives represented as well. And then it goes to research questions. And there we literally go in and look at the research questions that are stated in the study, and we post those. It looks like here there's just space for one question, but if you have one question, then another question, then another question, it can continue. You can expand the number of questions. And then once you've added a research question, you can go to add a finding. And so when I click on add a finding, what I'm going to be doing there is posting again the findings from the study, right? And that's important. And we try to stick to the language. It will say when you add a finding, is this directly taken from the language of the text or something you've summarized? And we put those findings. Does that make sense? Okay. No, so I'm going to just make up something. It won't do anything, Lucas. I'll be okay?
It will actually add a finding now if you
Oh.
create one, but we can.
No. I don't want to mess with that. Let's go to a study that has a finding. Maybe that would be a better way to do it. Let's go back to articles. I wonder if I can. What's the article I just did? I could search for this article. Colette. No, I have to search by title. A gradual increase. Oh, it worked. We struggle with little things sometimes, and we call Lucas and he fixes it. So this is a study I actually just worked on this morning. And if I'll click on the study, I'll go down to the findings. And there was one main research question that was the focus, and I identified sort of 2 findings within that study. If I click on findings now, it will take me to this as a finding page in which it asks me, was it in the manuscript, not in the manuscript? And then comes this crucial part, which is moving to what we call categories. So what we did some time ago, about after 6 months of working in the study, we didn't have categories. We came into a room and we actually went on a retreat and took all the findings from the first, 100 or 200 studies that we reviewed. And we took those findings and we went into a room and did sort of this qualitative, constructive process of saying, how do these group together? We basically this idea of creating categories or creating buckets that this finding here relates to. I'll give the example of tutoring. This is a tutoring focus here on this particular study. And it fits in one, it may fit in multiple areas. So it may be a tutoring study that's focused on culturally responsive pedagogy. So it would go into this other category called culturally responsive pedagogy. So we're basically creating these lots of buckets, right? And these buckets aren't perfect, but they're important because when we think about users, they're going to come with questions about, I'm really interested in culturally responsive pedagogy and pre-service. What's been going on? And so they want to look at what fell into that bucket. And they want to look at all the studies that are in that bucket, and they want to look at the sense that we made of that bucket itself. Does that make sense?
No, it does.
So there's a coding scheme for you to go through that basically is like a decision matrix, and it's not, I don't think we have that on the site, but we have it on the guides for you to follow.
I was going to say, is there like a cheat
Yeah,
sheet of
yeah.
the codes?
If you go to categories, probably the representation here is, I'll just go to all categories. And you'll see these area 1 areas. These are, so what we know about our studies and what we did in our initial sort of categorization is they're either focused on teacher educators or pre-service teachers or both. It's going to be one of those. So that was the first bucket. Almost everything goes into, it's either into teacher educator bucket or pre-service teacher or both. And what we're also finding is that it either sort of went into practices, things they do, or it fell into knowledge and beliefs. So those were sort of the big sort of second level identity, knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, and pre-service teachers, literacy experiences, teaching practices. So these were basically subcategories all the way through. You can see all of these university facilities supervisors. And in many ways, these particular categories are sort of big buckets. I mean, there are hundreds of studies. I didn't even look back, Lucas. I hate to drop back, but we're over 800 studies right now. It's 800 studies. So this is huge. So these are big buckets. What are probably the most interesting buckets as we think forward in terms of the, let me go to the next page. Are what we're calling topics. That is, these are where they're area 7s, and they're things like adolescence, assessment, content area literacy, children's literature, critical literacy, culturally relevant discussion, dialogic approaches, digital literacy, drama, emergent literacy. So these we pretty much assume are going to be the the buckets that a lot of people are going to want to go to, because that's where we do our work inside these buckets. Now, again, they're expanding. In fact, we have a place here for other. So this particular case in this study is one in which it's one of the first ones that we've actually found explicit attention to coaching. And coaching is not one of our topics in pre-service. So that's going into other. Eventually, as CITE moves forward, that could be elevated to a topic itself. And so we'll sort of backward engineer our system to identify topics that are studies that have focused on coaching, right? And one of the ways that we're doing that I'll mention in just a second is through something we're calling tags that get just things associated with articles when we're entering articles like, oh, coaching shows up here. Oh, communities of practice shows up here. Oh, there's terminology and phrases that reappear, and those are getting entered right now as tags. The good news is, again, from the user's perspective, I come and I look and I say, hey, I'm not interested in any of those topics, but I am interested in communities of practice. Well, what they can do is go to tags, this is brand new for us. Where's tag? Is it even over here?
It's under articles.
It's under articles. See, it's so nice to have so article tags. So you'll see here, I entered this just this morning, clinic. So that the work is being done in a clinic, in a university clinic. That's a term that we're going to throw in. Coaching was part of that. And apparently test was part of it. I think that's not testing kids. I think that's Lucas testing the system. That's good. But eventually this will be huge. This will be like a glossary or an index of terms that are used that if you click on that term, so let's do it for example. Lucas, let's cross our fingers here. If I click on coaching, eventually, once we're not there yet, thank you, Lucas. Eventually, if I click on that, every study that's been tagged with that article will show up, right? And right now there's only been one, so you're going to see what the system is. Okay.
So it's another way of searching.
It's another way of searching the system and sort of looking, within the, exactly.
And just setting up ways for people when we start thinking about, okay, what would this look like when we publish the results of this, when there's sort of a public site that people can access, what are the different ways that we want to provide to people to access articles? So this would give us yet another way. And here the value would be the ability to create tags that cut across categories. So up till now, it's exciting work. It gets better when we start actually synthesizing research, right?
Okay.
That's sort of our purpose, is to say, okay, what does the research say about preparation of pre-service teachers in the area of writing, for example? So somebody can go to the topic of writing, click, find all of these articles. Well, now what we're doing is organizing our synthesis writing teams. So I think Randy is doing the one. So what we've done is we've picked about 7 of these to start with, and we're doing our first syntheses of those topical areas. That will continue to expand as we sort of build these. And teams are formed, so writing teams are formed. I'm working on a team right now with tutoring, and the tutoring team consists of Catherine and Natalie and myself. So we're doing and writing that literacy. And what we've done is we've created a draft of that. It'll have an overview. For example, there's an overview of the tutoring topic. Is it up here? I don't think, we may have actually did we put that up on the system yet?
I think so.
Just to show?
Under synthesis, yeah.
Okay, so let's go to synthesis.
I think if you go to all syntheses, you'll find it.
Oh, yeah, you'll find it as the only one. So this is not the way it's going to look. It's going to look, this is sort of the internal, this is how we put it in terms of how it's displayed for somebody who's coming to the system. It'll be more along the lines of hyperlinks, so that it won't look like linear text. It'll be people being able to move around sort of the general first one is basically tutoring. What is tutoring? Sort of the conception of that category as we've used it and how that was expanded. Then what we've done is have a secondary where we look at within the area of tutoring research studies that have been done, We identified, I think, 4 areas. So studies that are focused on structure and design, studies, there should be 4 areas there. I don't know how that slides down. Oh, they're sliding down
In
slowly.
the box.
Yeah.
Pre-service teacher education outcomes, immediate outcomes, outcomes long-term transfer appropriation, mediating factors, and area 5 student outcomes. So those are the 5 areas that the studies cluster around, that we've written our syntheses around. And
Will
then,
that change at any point, especially if you're constantly adding on?
correct.
Okay.
You got it. That's the tricky part.
Okay.
So let me, even before we do that, so this one is the summary moving forward. So this is kind of like, okay, this is what this literature seems to be saying. Here's some things that we think are interesting and really some challenges looking forward, right? And then finally, there's a 4th area. Oh, I don't know if I click on that. It's not, basically it's tutoring graphics. Basically, it would say for all it'll list the articles. It'll show the range of different journals that they're published in. It'll show the years of publication. It'll show perspective, insider, outsider kinds of studies, methodological differences. So you sort of get a sense of the kinds of studies that are filling into this particular area. Now, what happens is we write. This is our editorial board. We operate just like a journal does. We send it to members of our editorial board. We've sent this one out to 4 members of our editorial board, asked them to review it in terms of its quality, its adequacy, all the kinds of scholarship criteria that one would have for a literature review. Although it's not a full literature review that you would find, it's the beginning. And we get feedback from them. Once we make it through our editorial board process, we'll finalize it and we'll put it up on site as our best representation at that moment of this literature, knowing that next year we're going to get another 2 years added that we have to rewrite and accommodate, knowing that everybody's going to come in and say, you missed this, you need to do this, or somebody will come in and say, I don't agree with that interpretation, or here's another area you should. So we'll be constantly using that to rewrite. We're sort of thinking that these will be updated annually, so we're forever writing these things.
Which is the interactive piece of.
Correct. You got this. You got this, right? So actually, let me just back up and mention 2 more things, and we're actually pretty good doing well on time. There's a news little side over there, and that is that we're going to be presenting, unveiling, showing CITE-ITEL at the annual meeting of Literacy Research Association in Nashville, and we're hoping that a lot of people will attend. We'll be going over the same kinds of things we've gone over here, but we'll also be breaking into subgroups around those topics. And so we're anticipating that by the time we get to LRA, we'll be having tutoring, writing, secondary English, drama, I'm trying to remember reading processes. There's like 8 areas that we will have done up to and mostly through the editorial board process to present at ITEL, at LRA. And we anticipate, although we have to go through review processes, that will happen every year. I mean, we'll submit it every year, so that we'll be coming back with either updates or additional reviews. And eventually, thinking really forward, we want people to come in and say, I would like to do the synthesis on this particular topic. And so and we're thinking that's going to be members of the editorial board, that they'll start taking the lead in doing the syntheses. So it's not always going to fall on us. What we anticipate is, what I would like to do, or what we'd like to do, is to connect our doctoral students to faculty from the outside. So if Ann Haas-Dyson comes in and says, I really want to look at early childhood in literacy teacher preparation, and we say, Lakia, will you work with Ann in doing this synthesis? So you can help them both navigate the system as well as interact with them around the construction of the review.
That makes
So
sense.
if Ann is watching this, I hope she understands it was just an example. She isn't on our editorial board yet. Lucas, what did we leave out that you're thinking about?
I think we've covered
The
pretty much
pieces?
everything, yeah.
I know as a new user, everything you just went through made a lot of sense, and like I'm leaving with a more complete understanding of what it's all about.
And ready to
Ready to sign, where's,
Oh,
to
yes.
sign the dotted.
Same.
Yes, 2 for 2. That's
Same.
awesome.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, we're excited. I mean, it really is. It's exciting. It has just such potential and importance for our field. That's the thing I keep coming back to is the seeds of this came from a session at LRA a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, in which there was, I don't know, some quality report came out of teacher preparation, some attack from this, some attack from that. And it was a big room of people, and well, they're not paying attention to the research that's been done. And then somebody said, where's the research that's been done? And there just was no place to go. And to write a literature in a traditional format, a literature review, ends up, it gets published, it's probably not worthwhile. It's so old by the time it's published, it's not really useful. And it represents a particular perspective rather than this sort of interactive perspective. So it was an answer to that. And then partially just recognizing that times are changing, right? And so we actually did a couple of literature reviews online using a very sort of, cobbled system of, I don't know, remember what we were using, a FileMaker Pro, and interacting with about 4 other people. And we did like 2 literature reviews that way. And each time we did them, we sort of looked back and said, well, we should keep doing this. It was like you bring closure to it, but the opportunities to open it up and keep it as ongoing, and then to open it up and keep it as interactive, we're just like, we're there now with the technology. And so that's where we're at.
Exciting.
Yeah.
It is.
Anything else? Any other questions? You're signed on. You're ready
I
to
don't.
signed on. Good.
Signed
Good. Well, great. So this is our orientation, and we invite any of you to LRA to come to that session. You'll see on the news there we do have an online orientation session. That was last. That's the one that had no sound. This is the replacement for that. We anticipate that site will be up and available for people to have access to in mid-December or early December. So at that point, we'll actually have a URL that you can go to and link into CITE and see what's going on. Right now, it's still at a phase that we're changing it constantly, and it's not ready for prime time yet.
That's right.
But will be.
Will do.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No,
Thank
thank
you.
you for
Thank you.
explaining it all.
Yeah.
Good.